Welcome to On Film, a podcast which delves into the lives and work of film professionals as they tell us who they are, what they do, and their journeys within the film industry. I'm Aadyaa Shah. This is part one of my interview with Krishna Purohit. He composes and produces music. He's worked on the original score for Bhasmasur, a feature film out on Netflix. He's also composed the music for various short films, such as Little Man out on Disney Plus Hotstar, Monday, and On the Blue Canvas. He also plays guitar and synth for indie band Lawntuba and produces electronica under the moniker Braja Jana. I wanted to ask you. I was actually trying to figure out for the longest time where to begin the interview because I wanted to know your background with music, how it started for you, as well as the most recent thing I've seen is actually Bhasmasur. So I wanted to know what are you more comfortable with starting with?
Let's start with what's happening maybe now or the future, and then we can work our way backwards maybe, if that's
Okay.
cool with you.
Okay.
Go for it.
Bhasmasur essentially is the story of a father, son, his sister, and his widowed aunt in a nondescript village in rural India.
Right.
Their companion or the animal that they have in their house is a donkey, and because the father is dead set on selling the donkey, the son accompanies him to the city to sell the donkey. Sadly, though,
Yes.
the son has developed a relationship or a friendship with that animal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he really feels for the animal. And the story essentially then also explores the father son dynamic. This was
Correct.
also, I think, it played at the Mumbai Film Festival in 2017.
It did. Yes. That's the
Okay.
year. Yeah.
Okay. And it came out on Netflix, I think, in 2019, was it?
Correct. 2019 it was out in Netflix, and it was supposed to come out on one more platform, and I think they're still in talks with it. Uh, they're still discussing it. It might come out on another platform soon.
Okay, awesome. No, so with this film, I'll first tell you what I absolutely loved about it, and then I want to open it up to your role within the film.
Great.
The
Yeah.
film is also visually a treat. It's absolutely fantastically
That's so true. Yeah, yeah.
it's fantastically made. I think it's also edited in a very interesting way. There's a very interesting pace to it, and it's also sort of showing. I think the director Nishil Sheth as
Hmm.
someone who's very much open to the image, or
Yes.
setting up a good frame, also making sure that the story holds, also creating interesting characters.
Right.
So as I was watching the film, but also was struck me about the music was
Hmm.
the music is it feels a bit Western. So
Hmm.
I wanted to sort of know first of all, how did the film happen? How did you come on board for the film? And how did you arrive at that sound?
Cool. I think you made some like really fantastic observations about firstly the frame and the visual aesthetic, how much attention has been given to that, and even the edit, because the edit of the film was probably the longest part of the post production, and the music also, because once we shot it, uh, we were not so happy with it, and then a lot changed at the edit table. um, okay, so let's speak about how it came together in the first place. So the director Nishil, he was a student at Whistling Woods, which is a film school. It's owned by Mukta Arts, and he was studying there. He made his diploma film, and then he was just planning to take the usual route. You know how it is. You get out of a film school, and then you either start your own production house and then start doing these small corporate videos, or maybe you go assist at a really well-known director, and then you keep on doing that grind for a while, and then hopefully at some point you write a feature length film and then you pitch it and then someone likes it. So he was almost about to start that, but then uh, I think he got drunk one day with a couple of his other film school friends, and he was like, fuck this, I don't want to do this right now, and I don't know when I will actually have a platform to make a feature film. Let me just do it right now. Let me pull in whatever resources I have, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's fine. I'll go assist someone, but I don't want to assist someone right away. And the other guy who turned out to be later turned out to be the producer of the film, Karan, he was very supportive, and I think Karan was the one who gave him that push, like, yeah bro, let's do this, we can definitely do this. And they already had this like synopsis, or the two liner that you mentioned. They already had it because Nishil had sort of read this story about a farmer who was heavily in debt, and then I mean, I won't spoil the film, but then how he deals with the debt, and some more masala was added to the story. But this is based on a real life story that Nishil read, so he'd already read it, and then he'd already made like a small 5 minute film on it, and I'd done the music for that also. In fact, that was one of the first few short films I actually composed music for. He came up to me, and then I was I was very happy to take it, and then that was that. We forgot about it, and then when he actually told me that he was going to remake that thing into a feature, I was not too happy. I was happy that he was going to make a feature film firstly, and then he had the confidence, he had decided to pool in his resources. But I wasn't really happy with the concept, because the 5 minute, even though it had a lot of soul, it felt like I couldn't imagine what how he would stretch it, because me not being a filmmaker, I didn't know. I thought it would just same length, and not the same length, the same concept, you just stretch it. But what he did later with the script was something entirely different, and I couldn't have, in my wildest dreams, like in probably, like, if there's alternate realities, like 50% of the other versions of me can't imagine what that film would eventually turn out like. And I think that has a lot to do with the people Nishil collaborated with. So when you mentioned the visual aesthetic, he specifically got on board this guy to shoot it, the DOP Shrish, who is a director himself. He's made great films, but he has a really good taste for, composing a frame that suits the script. Yeah, he has the eye for it, and also he'd just gotten this new cinema camera, black magic cinema camera, so then that also works out.
Of course. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and then he got on board Raghav, who was also doing a lot of plays. He's a playwright. He's an actor. So getting people who specialize in bring in these special creative talents in their department, I think that really helped Nishil a lot. The edit was done by Pawan, who in my opinion is like, I've met quite a few editors, and Pawan in my opinion is one of the most efficient editors. Like his observation skills, his technical skills, and his creativity are all like 8 on 10, 9 on 10. Because I've seen people, like, if they're really creative, they have the creativity thing going on for them, but then they might not be so organized. Their organizational skills are fuck all. Like, can I say fuck?
Yeah. Don't
I can?
worry.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay.
It's cool.
Great,
Chill
great.
scene.
Yeah. So what Pawan taught me was that you can be firstly really creative, really good at your work, and still be really good at labeling your files, putting them into correct folders, being on time with your deliveries, I thought like, it's always either or. You either do this thing or either do that thing. So Pawan was a great asset on the film. And then I would like to think that I was an asset or a valuable asset on the film in some ways. So I think Nishil had already gotten this team together before we even way before pre-production. We just like got people who were well intentioned and people who knew they would add some good creative talent to the film. And then it took about 6 months for them to get into the groove. Then they started pre-production. They shot one schedule, and it was shot in Rajasthan. I mean, it's actually very ambitious of someone who's just out of film school to make a film of that scale, that too in an entirely different city. Not even city, it's a village in Rajasthan. And to shoot something somewhere where you don't have the luxury of if you for example you forgot to rent this particular equipment. In film city you can just like make a call and the guy will come and deliver it to you, but there you have to plan everything in advance. I didn't go on the location, but I've heard stories where Shirish, the DOP, he took a stand and he was like, I'm not shooting till you get my crew some water, because people were really thirsty and they legit didn't have water on set. And so those were the things they were facing, like really high temperatures. There was no hotel in the place that they were staying. There was one hotel which was really far away. So in that sense it was very ambitious, and some things went south. And then so they had to shoot one more schedule. They had to divide it into two schedules. And by the time the film came for post-production, the director was really exhausted. And
Okay.
yeah, so then we decided to take some time off and then revisit the edit. And I think all the people Nishil surrounded himself with have just contributed in a very very cool way to the film. I think that's how, like, this is something that I've worked on a bunch of films, but Bhasmasur is one of those films where I'm genuinely proud of whatever we've done. You know, irrespective of where the film reaches eventually, if it's forgotten or if it's like eventually like watched by many people, I'll still be proud of what we did. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I forgot the
No,
question.
no,
Yeah,
it's
you
cool.
you
It's
asked
cool.
about the
It's cool.
Western.
It's cool. It's cool. No, no, no. So I just want to, before you get into that, I just wanted to add that it's a very unusual film for to see on Netflix, because it's compared to what they usually have. Again, it's a very different kind of different genres and different kinds of films, but this is again something I would just see probably at a festival, and mentally I'll think,
Right.
oh, this would go onto a movie, or probably this would make its way onto a screening somewhere in the city. But to actually have it on Netflix is a big deal, because
It
it's
is.
it's because I feel like a lot of people who would have completely missed this at the film festival or screening at any other place would probably now see it here. So,
Yeah.
huh. So, I wanted to now come back to how you arrived at the sound for the film.
The Western sound that you mentioned.
Yeah,
That, I
yeah,
think that was also like a very accurate observation. Uh, I, yeah, before I just wanted to comment on the Netflix thing. I wasn't also very sure of, like, it eventually coming up on streaming platforms. Even I thought of it going on doing its festival runs and then maybe just movie or somewhere like you mentioned. So I got a chance to take my parents for the screening for the Mumbai Film Festival, and I thought, okay, that's it. My parents have watched it, great. Now on to other things. But because it got onto Netflix, a bunch of my other friends who've been interested in what I do, or what they want to see what I've been up to, maybe my school friends, they actually saw it. And then a lot of them came up to me and then they told me about how they genuinely like the film, not just because I've worked on it and I'm their friend, but they wouldn't generally watch something like that or come across something like that. And even some of my extended family, my cousins and all, they spoke about it, where they spoke about the exact few things you mentioned, where it's not something you would expect to see on Netflix. I don't know how or why Netflix decided to pick it up, but I'm glad they did.
Now
So the
coming back
western
to the Western, yeah, the sound.
the western sound, yes. So the sound of the film, uh, it I feel like the sound was very much defined by Nishil in his mind. Not the exact soundscape or the sound palette, but the feeling was very much defined while he was scripting, and
Okay.
he was listening to a lot of soundtracks while writing. And I don't know if I mention it, then maybe you can see the similarities. But this one soundtrack he was completely engrossed in was the Motorcycle Diaries. It's a it's a Spanish film, I think, and the music is given by this guy called Gustavo
Gustavo
Santaolalla.
Santaolalla, yes. I think he did
Santaolalla.
music for Dhobi Ghat also, I think.
Did he? Oh yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
did,
He
he
did.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, I was so surprised. Like,
Yeah, no, like it's
yeah, out of nowhere, Dhobi got.
cartoon.
Yeah, and he did this video game also, which also was really beautiful. And yeah, I haven't seen a lot of uh, other films where he's done the music, but then he initially asked me to watch this, and he was very clear about, like, okay, this track I was listening to when I wrote this scene, and this track I was listening to. And I generally for me, what ends up happening when a director gives me a reference track is, uh, it would become a challenge for me to deliver something to the director that also fits in the world of the reference track, but is also something that is original and I am happy putting out, and also the director, that's unique to the film. But with this one, it was so far out. The sounds, the script on one hand was this rustic Indian village, and the music I was presented was like, it's adventurous and also sometimes heavily emotional. But I didn't like, at first I didn't see, like, how these two would go together. Emotionally they could, but also then the challenge, it wasn't so challenging, because I know, okay, there's things that Nishil likes about this that I can borrow, and there's things that I definitely can't borrow, that I know I will have to create on my own, the sound palette. So that's why I think it has this, like, strong western sound, because the reference track, yeah, that and I think most of my favorite film soundtracks I've worked on, rather, have been where directors have a very clear sense of what they want. Either they have reference tracks, or they have their musicians themselves, and they'll tell me, oh, put a string section over here, or put some cellos or a pizzicato section over here. And when the director has that sort of clarity, then you can that puts certain limitations on you as a composer, and then within those limitations, I feel like I can do so much more, as opposed to some director just telling me, okay, so this scene is sad, or the scene is emotional, so we need emotional music, or some cheerful music. And I'm like, boss, there's like 10,000 ways you can do cheerful. Like, I maybe what I'm thinking might not be great for this film, or might not work for what you have in mind. So yeah, I'm glad in this case, like, now I've started to appreciate people who come with reference tracks, and I've slowly also developed the ability to go away from being presented the reference tracks, and then taking what getting to know what the director likes about the reference tracks, and then slowly moving away from it. And Nishil was very clear about, like, how you mentioned the sound is western. He said, I remember him saying, like, you don't need to think about village sounds specifically. Of course, the sound palette will need to be grounded in the visual, and it will eventually use some instruments from there, but the composition doesn't need to sound like that. And yeah, I think that his confidence in music that was not typically Indian, that's what made me feel confident about experimenting. Yeah. And I was glad that it was my first feature film, and it was his first feature film also, but uh, he had a lot of clarity about the soundtrack, which helped me.
Okay. What I
Yeah.
also wanted to know was, were you then, how involved were you in pre-production? Like, did you have to read the script,
Hmm.
discuss the script with the director? Like, how did that happen?
So I was involved in the pre-production. I mean, I got involved with the team right when it was conceived, and Nishil was bringing together the team. So even before like the first draft of the actual script was written, I got on board. I wasn't so involved in, say, the scripting phase of it, like suggesting changes to the director or something.
Mm-hmm.
But Nishil wanted me to be in the zone and start thinking about the the scenes where he definitely wanted music
Mm-hmm.
before even he went on location, and he was very clear about that. So he got me involved. He would invite me for script readings, and that that really helped me uh, firstly open up to the project and be excited about it even before the I get the first cut, because I like I told you, I couldn't imagine how uh, engrossing the final script could turn out, or even the first draft was so engrossing as compared to the 5 minute that he'd made back in college, uh, which I can't, like, in retrospect, I can't blame him for like not making it as interesting as the feature, because it was like his first year in college or something probably. And it still had a lot of soul, like it was a very strong film, but turning it into a feature, that I couldn't see. But then when I was involved in post production, then I could see, okay, this could really turn out if you get the right set of actors. If you pull off the shoot well, then you can really make a good film out of this. And then I was genuinely excited to do it. And uh, I've noticed, if I'm excited about a project, I end up making something that I like at least, and the director also likes. Like uh, maybe other people will also like it, but I know for sure, like I will make something that at least me and the director, both of us, are happy with.
Okay. And
Yeah.
was it important for you to understand the characters and the emotions within the screenplay? Like, did that inform your process of composing?
At the time, I thought it was, but in retrospect, not. I would say 25% of it was uh, the characters themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The scene by itself and the emotion behind the scene was the bigger driving factor, and the biggest driving factor was how the director saw it. Nishil's vision and his narrations. I think that's what like put me really into the zone. And yeah, at the time, I thought maybe getting deep into the psychology of the characters and understanding what they must be feeling, the nuanced emotions, that could maybe help. And maybe it did on some level, but the the emotions I did end up working on are very like primal and basic emotions. And so if you look at the track names, a lot of them are like, just labeled the way, the way I made them. Like there is a theme that's called the bonding theme. That's where like you see the kid and the donkey.
Huh.
Bhasmasur is the name of the donkey. So Bhasmasur and the kid bonding. And then there is a theme called Thirst, which is literally like, okay, I think I might be giving spoilers here. So, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's
it's
very
fine.
very primal emotions. So
Okay.
I didn't really need to get into like the subtext of the
Mm-hmm.
scene or the characters,
Mm-hmm.
but it did help me to uh, immerse myself into the world of just the world, and maybe create sort of like, if you're imagining, I'm sure, like, when, since you've been doing script writing yourself, uh, say there's this fantasy world that you create. So you start with the world building. What language do they speak? What do they look like? And what are the costumes they wear? So in terms of the sound palette also, like, I started off by building the family of instruments and stuff like that. So it helped me with the world building.
This was also it's interesting in terms of what you said about world building, because um, from the perspective of script writing, definitely that is something I think about. But in terms of music, again, that's something that I didn't know could influence. I didn't know the world was something that could always really influence the music or the way it was composed. There was
Right.
also so I was watching a lot of featurettes on the making of Tenet, and
Oh.
so I think in one of them I remember, I think Christopher Nolan shot, I think after shooting and editing the film, he got to show the film to Travis Scott. And I think
Right.
after that, Travis Scott came on board. So whatever the song you hear by Travis Scott right at the end of the film is, I think, very much seems to have probably been influenced by overall probably what he saw and what he heard. So,
Right.
huh.
I didn't know it was composed specifically for the film or the credit sequence. I did not know that.
So
I
I
thought it
think,
must be a song.
no, so I've been binging interviews by Ludwig Göransson because, like,
Oh yeah, man,
I'm a
that
fan. I'm a
guy.
fan.
Me too, me too. I
Yeah.
must admit, yes, fan.
So I think in one of his interviews he mentioned something like he had used, I think, some form of Travis Scott's voice in one of the tracks within the film. But he'd also, I think, layered it with a lot of other things, and so it wasn't very recognizably him. But
Right.
I think they wanted just something at the end to maybe tie it all together, and then they said probably they wanted to get Travis Scott on board for this. So I wanted to know, in terms of when you sort of does sort of seeing the finished film again influence the way, or at least seeing maybe a portion of the edit, does that also some way influence the way you find the music is going to play out? So even if, let's say, you have it ready, um, would seeing it in front of you maybe want you, maybe would you make
Right.
certain tweaks after seeing it, or do something different, or yeah.
I'd never thought about this, Adya, but now that you bring it up, I can very specifically see, like, moments where
Huh.
after seeing the edit, we decided to make some changes, or say even like the intro credit sequence that came to
Mhm.
me completely after like watching the film, the whole edit. I watched the
Mhm.
first cut, and then I came up with that,
Mhm.
and certain changes were made, like the scale of the scale was drastically increased, because I didn't imagine Nishil to come back with fucking drone shots of, like, majestic Rajasthan hills
Mhm.
and vast empty desert. So that that definitely pushed me to actually increase the scale and make it slightly more cinematic at spaces. Though most of the film is very close, and people are up close, you see their faces a lot. But there are parts where the film does open up, and yeah, those parts especially, and the intro credit scene.
Okay.
And I think the just when you brought up this aspect about uh, putting something that sort of ties in the whole film, or the thematically what the film stands for, I see that happening a lot with uh, the credit sequences that I've composed. Either it's like intro credits or outro credits. And there's one more feature film that I did end up doing, which is not released. I don't think it'll be released. And in that as well, like, when I once I saw the whole film, and not just saw it, I composed for the duration of the film, and then maybe I felt like, okay, you know what, there's something that's emerging out of this whole musical world, and then there's something that could tie it all together. So yeah, that's a great observation. I've never actually given it a conscious thought.
I really liked the credit sequence in the beginning because
uh,
um, it sort of sets up the pace of the film in a very interesting way. And I quite
hmm
liked the music for that as well. One other thing I wanted to ask you is, I think I was listening to the tracks also for the film are on Spotify. So I was listening to
yes.
the tracks individually, and a couple of them that I think one of the ones that I really liked was a track called "Setting Off."
Hmm
So do you want to play it? Because
yes, I'd love to.
that was "Setting Off." It's very interesting because I think was that Sarangi I heard somewhere in the
Yes, yes, yes.
ah.
There was Sarangi that came in. That was a very conscious choice to put in at least something that's, remotely Rajasthani.
Huh. And I
Yeah.
liked the fact that it was there, but it also went away. So
Huh.
it was just like a taste of it and it went away. And what was the
Yeah.
percussion you used?
Oh, percussion. So the first percussive element that starts off is actually the guitar. Like there's this percussion thing going on, which is like chick, chick, tumb, tumb, chick, tumb, tumb, chick,
Hmm.
tumb, tumb. That's one. That's the one, and that sort of starts on just on the acoustic guitar, and then I build it up with the ghatam. A ghatam is like a matka,
Mhm.
and yeah, it sounds just like a matka.
Okay.
And then there's like a dhol that comes in later.
Hmm.
So when it gets huge, there's like probably like Indian those big ass dhols called nagaras, but they're not played in the traditional nagara style. And there's also one layer of like this orchestral timpani, which
Hmm.
is a very Western instrument,
Hmm.
but you slide it in there and it just adds something. It doesn't like make it sound very Western, but it just adds certain cinematic elements to it.
Hmm.
That's just there for that effect.
Yeah.
Uh, it did start off with the percussion though. Like the track, the first thing that came to my mind was the percussion.
Okay. Oh, nice. So this is at what point in the film this is? I'm unable to remember exactly.
Right. So this is when the father has decided that okay, they are going to the city to
Hmm. Hmm.
sell off the donkey, and it is when they start their journey. And
Hmm.
in some sense, the film is also a journey film. So this was a very momentous point in the film where okay, they are setting off for the journey,
Okay.
and they
Okay.
don't know what waits for them in the journey.
Huh.
So and it's a journey of three people: the donkey and the father and the son. But not everyone is perceiving the journey in the same way.
Hmm.
The father is probably looking forward to some other thing, something else. He has some other things on his mind. The son is probably like, excited about something entirely different, about going to the city for the first time. He's also sad that his donkey is not going to be with him anymore, but also that he's traveling somewhere, he's looking at places. So uh, yeah, we try to put in those elements that, okay, it's a journey, but it starts off with like sweet acoustic guitar, innocent kind of, uh, probably representing the childlike emotions of setting off on a journey, and then it gets a little serious, and that's the father's dilemma of how do I get out of the situation.
So it's interesting how you've also woven in the characters within this one piece. So because there's a lot
Hmm.
of range within it. So in that way to me is super interesting. And
Thank you.
I think there was also one more track, Voices from the Ferris, which is
Right,
in
right.
like a very interesting we'll just play a little bit of it.
Sure. That's the intro credits
Yeah,
thing that we just spoke about.
that was Voices from the Ferris. I just wanted to take our conversation forward
Hmm.
regarding the Ferris track. So
Right, the
that
Ferris
was,
track.
so that was also compared to setting off. It was also a lot more somber.
Hmm.
So how
That's
did
true.
how did that come about? How did the track come together?
I have to constantly think of not spoiling the film, so
No, no,
let me
it's
construct this in a non-spoiler way.
okay.
Uh, so I did want to set up how like the very basic tone of the film, where the film is headed, what are you in for, and the visuals when you see the intro credits happening, it's actually like a lot of carnival like visuals, but it's all shot in a very blurry motion, in a very blurry focus. So it's either all that the lights are out of focus, you can just see like the, what do you call it, the Ferris wheel or some carnival lights. And basically what's happening is the kid is having a dream, and in his dream he's looking at all of these, he's basically gone to a mela. So the first thought that comes is, okay, it's a very innocent and happy dream, but I did want to juxtapose it with some sort of uh, some sort of a very slightly ominous, not very, but yeah, slightly it's got slightly ominous feel to it, but also not very sure. It's also vague, because you can listen to it and you can be like, huh, it could fit with maybe a happy family gathering event, or maybe it could, some persons just lost someone and it could still maybe work. So I very consciously wanted to be in that space, and I wanted it to have a little bit of a dreamy effect also, because he's basically he's dreaming. So you hear these voices of like kids on a Ferris wheel, but they're very distant and far off, and there's a soothing, like, some ladies whispering into your ear in the right side if you're listening to it on the headphones, obviously, and then she goes over here on the left side. So I wanted to just have fun with all of those elements. It was a very indulgent thing. I don't know if the film really required all of those trippy things, but I was like, I want to have fun with this. So I made the guitar sound like it's playing on a radio, it gave it that sort of an effect and stuff like that.
That's also very, I mean, the first time I heard the track, I don't think I really caught on to these nuances. So now this also makes me
Hmm.
want to go back and also
Because I
identify.
mentioned all of these
Yeah,
things.
I want to now go back
Oh.
and actually listen to and try to figure out, oh, this was what he was talking about at that time, where it's sounding like a radio and that kind of thing. So
Hmm.
it seems to me that there's a lot of layers of sound then that you have assembled.
Yes, yes, surely. And a big credit for all of this. Maybe not this track so much, but just the idea of layering things and also working in these small, say, nuances in terms of like this character represents this sound, things like that. The director is a big influence. He played a big role in me thinking about these things in the first place. I would, in fact, most of the good films, like good film soundtracks I've done, I feel like the director should get a co-composing credit in some way, even if like they haven't done the actual job of composing, of coming up with the music, but creating the world and building the world. I think I've had my best experiences when the directors give me a lot of inputs and they speak to me a lot. They give me a lot of ideas. It's just like, how if a director is working with an actor, they sit down with them, they probably like feed a lot of stories, and then uh, all those things. I think like if they do that with the post production guys also, it just helps them a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So which other films have you sort of had this kind of experience with, where you have a very collaborative process?
Hmm. So this other film is this it's a short film, and the soundtrack also, this is something I put up on Spotify. It's a film called Little Man,
Hmm.
and the director is also very young, and he he had a lot of clarity. I think I yeah the I've only put up things that I'm really fond of, and there's also things that I'm kind of fond of, but they're still yet to be put out on Spotify or anywhere. But this thing I loved a lot because the director had so many, like, cute little things mapped out in terms of music. Even if, like, he had a lot of reference tracks, and if you listen to the reference tracks, we deviated quite a lot. And that's the fun, like, you bring in a reference track and then we play around with it, and then I get to understand what you like about it, and then we deviate. So Little Man is one of these other films, and other films also, but then uh, I realized that not a lot has been uploaded. But
Huh.
I should mention this guy I've been working with. I think he could very well be, like, 5-6 years down the line, he could have come out with like a big Netflix feature. His name is Mehkansh,
Mhm.
and it feels like he's created his own personal Mehkansh cinematic universe where the characters behave in a certain way, and it's accepted. Like, it's absurd in the real life, but it's like, in this universe ऐसे ही करता है, ऐसे ही चलते हैं. And he's also, like, even if he might not have a lot of clarity with uh, very specific sounds, he will know what role does the music play over there.
Mhm.
Is it to disorient the viewer? Is it to guide them to the next scene or something?
Mhm.
So in those ways, he has a lot of clarity, and I really enjoy working with that.
So I think Little Man, I remember, I think it's a 13-minute short. It's currently on Disney
Hmm.
Hotstar, Disney Plus Hotstar.
Correct.
It also follows a young, I think, 10-year-old boy, a young
Right.
10-year-old
Right.
boy
Right.
who I
Oh, you
think,
watched Little Man also?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
No,
Great.
no, no. I think,
It's not.
huh,
So I should give you context. So when it was made, it was a student film,
yeah.
and the guy was still. It was his diploma film, and then it ended up being on Hotstar, which is also great. But filmmaking wise, I feel like the director had a lot of ideas. Some of it, like, didn't really, like, they didn't hit the spot,
Mhm.
but again, he was still learning, and he's made great films
Mhm.
before and after that. That is also a good film, but I feel like that film could have, if we had
Mhm.
time maybe for more pre-production and more resources, it could have been much better.
Okay. And I know that you've primarily worked though within the short film space.
Yes, yes.
So I
I've
think
done three
huh.
feature films, but I can't even count how many short films I've done.
So I think
Yeah.
how many of them are okay, okay. So my first question I think would be how many of them are accessible to people like me who, I've not worked
Uh,
on the film, but they're also, I know Little Man is on a platform, but are the rest on
hmm.
platforms as well? And the other thing
No.
is, oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
No, no,
I
no, no.
might have something else to add, but please finish the question.
No, no. My other question was leaping from, let's say, short films to feature films. Like, what
Hmm.
is that leap like? Because I remember you also mentioning that
Hmm.
that Bhasmasur was your first feature film. So, what were your
Right.
learnings there? Were you tackling certain things for the first time, or yeah?
Hmm. Definitely many things. But coming to the first part of the question, where you asked me how many of these projects I worked on are available online to watch, I would say maybe like less than 10%, easily
Okay.
less than 10%. Yeah. And a lot of films that I worked on, even if they they like they weren't intended to be posted on YouTube, for example, or maybe a streaming. They were more like festival. They were produced for a festival run, and then they end up being on a hard drive, which is as someone who's worked on it, I would love for it to be out, because some of those films I'm proud of. Some of them I'm happy they're on hard drives, but some of them I'm proud of. And but I guess, you know, uh, to quote our mutual friend Mr. Shalom, ये लाइन ही ऐसा है.
Huh. Okay. Okay.
So yeah, it's okay. But hopefully there's some films that I did back in the day that are eventually finding a release on Hotstar. A lot
Mhm.
of these films, like a lot of these student films especially, and
Okay.
some of them are very good, so I'm happy. Mehkansh's film might uh, the deal has gone through with Hotstar, so I don't know, but these things generally take a lot of time, so I don't know when it will be out.
Okay.
Right. And then
And
making the leap, I still feel like I'm I keep oscillating.
okay.
Every once in a while I will, do a short film. Feature films I've done 3. And my main thing as of now is short films, I guess, because I've just gotten more short film opportunities. That's just it. And I also do corporate stuff, so
Mhm.
I think that's the bread and butter as of now. So the length, what changes is uh, just by the format of it being like, a longer duration. The things you have, the scope that you have, the playground rather,
Mhm.
is much wider. And thematically you can explore a lot more nuances, like things we talked about voices from the Ferris, or even setting off. Those things maybe not so much in the short
Mhm.
film space I've been able to
Mhm.
explore, because even in terms of like the scripting and acting itself, they have to fit in, say, a certain scenario within that much time. They have to
Mhm.
establish, they have to get the viewer uh, immersed into the world, establish the world, and then some character development has to happen, and then maybe something has to reach the climax. So it's been fairly yeah, because the parameters are less, it's been fairly simpler to crack the short film thing. For a feature film, I've worked with the directors mostly, and uh, they have been just guiding me. I get immersed into the story as early as I can, so that I have these, like, sort of guiding points, like markers on the edit timeline, or say a lighthouse like that shines light from far away, like, okay, this is where this emotion needs to be pushed, so it's coming up from far ahead, you can see, and then you sort of build up to it. And it features me, there's a lot of time for me to have some callback maybe to some theme, and to take one theme and then develop it some more. Of course, these are ideas that have been explored by so many good filmmakers, and I've just been inspired by them. So it just helps me to give me that playground. It gives you a lot more to play with. One major learning I had that I remember very clearly is a technical learning, which is that whenever, as a composer, you're sending in exports to your sound engineer or sound designer, always put this thing called a limiter at the end of your master, and then send in the exports. And yeah, I had a bad experience where I didn't know any of this. I just sent my exports to my sound guy, and they were eh, mixing it at the studio. They'd rented the studio space. It was a 5.1 setup, and apparently there was a peak, a clip thing that clipped in my thing,
Okay.
and this guy's monitor speaker just blew off.
Damn.
It's an
Okay.
expensive studio, yeah. So I got very embarrassed at that point. I wasn't there, but
Huh.
Nishil was there, and so was the sound designer. If it was just the sound guy, Yatrik, I would have been like, this guy's just like, taking my case. But Nishil was there to verify it, and yeah, I trust Nishil.
These are also very crucial learnings that you can
Very
obviously,
crucial,
where you
yeah,
can carry
because it
forward.
left such a mark on my experience. It's kind of really embarrassing, like, किसी का इतना नुकसान हो गया, इतना studio में, like a 5.1 monitoring setup is no joke. Like, it takes a lot of effort to set up, a lot of money to firstly purchase all of that equipment, and then you end up blowing it. Your track ends up blowing it. Though then I learned to, like, joke about it, and then be like, yeah, my music was fire, man, it was so good, it killed the monitors.
Watch out for part 2 of my interview with Krishna Purohit. You can find our newest episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow our Instagram and Facebook pages for more updates in the description below.